Good evening and welcome to the Town of Millis MBTA 3A Advisory Committee. It is Wednesday, August 2nd. I am Jody Garzon, the chair of the committee, and I am calling the meeting to order. Do we have any announcements or updates?
I have none.
No.
Hearing none, then why don't we move on to our continuing discussion of the multifamily rezoning and proposed bylaw process. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah. Go ahead.
Bob, can you make it so I can share my screen if you haven't done so already?
Yeah, you can go right ahead, I believe.
Can we improve
Okay,
the audio any?
fantastic. All right, thank you so
Pardon?
much, everybody.
Can we get
this
it
is
any
just gonna be
louder
me tonight
audio?
from MAPC,
Make it
and-
louder?
The audio, yeah, because I can't really understand.
Hold on just a minute.
Talk through all this stuff.
John, just a second. Are we hearing only through my computer?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all we're
Yes,
hearing
we're
from.
not
Oh.
hearing it through the,
Okay, let me turn my computer up then.
Or if we have
or
that
is-
fancy
and
thing.
is that going to work?
Or move the mic. You can move the mic.
Does that,
This one.
does the owl or whatever
This
that
is-
is work?
No, you should move the mic closer to the speaker on your
Oh, okay.
computer.
This 21st century,
There you go.
okay, I think we're good.
We'll just pretend we're at open mic night, Bob, and you gotta get the mic right up to the amp there.
That's it, okay. I think
All right, how we doing? Can everyone hear me?
It's better.
Hear you. Yeah.
everybody said yes.
Okay, everybody said yes. If anyone needs me to stop and repeat anything, just please let me know. That's what I'm here for. We're going to go ahead and get started. And so tonight's agenda, we're going to talk through what the goals of the meeting are, why we're here. We're going to give us some quick project updates. The meat and potatoes of this is going to be talking through the different 3A zoning scenarios and seeing if there's any changes we want to make before taking all of this to the public. We're going to discuss the online open house, which will be taking this to the public, and then the next steps as far as how the project is going to move forward. Goals for tonight, just so we are all clear, we got 3 goals, and the first one is to get feedback from you all on the different scenarios that we're going to be presenting. These are going to be both maps and with boundaries and some regulatory frameworks. If we need to refine these boundaries and scale back or change what we're looking at, we'll do that here today as well. I think that's going to be the biggest part of our conversation, is seeing if we want to modify the boundaries of the proposed draft districts at all, and then preparing for the public engagement with the online open house. So we'll have a conversation about what's going to happen, what the rules are for MAPC, the rules for the town, the rules for the committee, the rules of the public, things like that. So real quick, some project updates. What we've been working on is really getting to the point where these scenarios for the different 3A zoning ways of moving forward can be brought to this meeting and to be brought to the public. So we've been doing a lot of internal work on our own, and a lot of work just checking in with Bob, talking through some different options, talking through some various opportunities and various ways of moving forward. And anytime there's something that we got to kind of talk through and figure it out, we've been doing a lot of that kind of work. So we've been developing a lot of stuff based on the analysis we've done, based on all the feedback that we've gotten from you all at the committee meetings, the feedback we've gotten from the public input, as well as all the different stuff relating to how all these districts need to get modeled and put together, and all of the tech-heavy stuff that the state is having us do. And internally on our end, we have a couple different checks and balances internally to make sure that all these different 3A projects we're working on at MEPC are going the way that they're supposed to and following best practice, and that we're all doing things the correct way and doing them together. So we have a data services team, and they've gone ahead and verified the modeling work that we've done and said that everything is exactly the way it should be. And the other people on the housing team outside, and Alex and myself, we've had numerous conversations with them, walking through the zoning recommendations, seeing all the different things that we could potentially do, and kind of talking through all of it with them. And so far, everything has gone really, really well. There's been a lot of making sure that you cross the T's and dot the I's and all of that good stuff. But realistically speaking, I feel like we're in a really good spot. And we're at a place now where, based on all the input we've gotten from you all and all these other different avenues that we've been doing for analysis work, we're in a really good spot to be able to take this to the public. So after we refine things today, that's going to be our goal. the different scenarios we have. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a real quick conversation about kind of how density looks. And this is partially for the benefit of you all, so this is kind of fresh in your minds as we have this conversation around what these districts could look like. And also for members of the public who may be watching tonight or who may be watching this on the YouTube channel sometime in the near future, leading up to town meeting, trying to understand what all of this stuff is about. So if you're looking at this saying, yeah, I already know, it's all good, just bear with me for a few minutes and we'll get to the meat and potatoes of it. What I would like to do is get through all of this, get through all of the different zoning scenarios that we have, and then we'll backpedal and kind of see how things look as far as where we need to revise, where we need to have conversations, where we need to go back and potentially change some things. So I'm going to ask the committee to hold questions and comments until we get to the end of the 3A zoning scenario section, and then I'll turn the floor over to you all and we'll have a conversation about it. And I expect it, there should be some good conversation coming out tonight. So we're talking about visualizing density here, and when you look at these two pictures, it would be really easy for our brains to kind of look at this thing on the right and say this is some big, huge, monolithic thing with lots of people and shops and apartments stacked into the sky and all this kind of stuff, and think that it looks like a very dense development. And it's true. It's true. And what we have on the left is a very quaint home on a single lot that's a much smaller lot. It's clearly much fewer units. It's nowhere near 100 times the units as the other place, 350 versus 3. But because of the way that it's set up, we have 16 units per acre on the left and 15 units per acre on the right. So this is a situation where even though something looks so big and foreboding and dense, it actually isn't as dense as the thing on the left. So what I'm really trying to illustrate here is that our brains do a lot of things to kind of trick us and do some weird things with size that aren't necessarily reflective of the reality of the situation, and also show that we can get dense numbers that are going to comply with what we need to with this MBTA Communities Act, and not have it be some giant monolithic thing that doesn't really fit in well in Millis. We can do a lot of stuff that's going to be able to match the town character. Here's another way of looking at it, and the density here is much higher. We have a triple decker on the left and a small 8-unit apartment building on the right. Very small lots, about a tenth of an acre on each one, and the density for the triple decker is 31 units per acre, and for the little apartment building it's 69 units per acre. Also very extreme, much higher than what sorts of requirements we're going to have to make for the MBTA Communities 3A zoning thing. But again, just to kind of illustrate how it looks, how it can potentially look, and just because the density numbers are high, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about substantially large apartment buildings all over the place. So just to kind of have this in the forefront of our minds as we have this conversation. When we think about different housing types, even just getting away from density and thinking about how something can theoretically look, here's a couple different examples of some housing types. We have a mixed-use development in Maynard, and it's right in their downtown there. We got some shops on the first floor, followed by 2 levels of multifamily. And on the right, we have some townhomes that are up in Melrose. No mixed use, as you can see, but we got small setbacks. We have things very close to the sidewalk, a different kind of urban form than what we see a lot of in Millis, but it still has a little bit of this sort of small town charm to it. And again, not necessarily talking about big developments, big apartment buildings, all this kind of post-war, mid-century stuff that a lot of us associate with multifamily. That's not necessarily the case, and all the stuff that comes out of this zoning, we don't anticipate that old style of apartments happening. We anticipate things that are a little bit more like this. So what we want to do with these regulations is guide development, guide the market, so that's going to be doing things that fit in with what people want to see and fit in with what works well with the town. So with all that in mind, we're going to talk through some things that apply for all the different zoning scenarios before we get down to each one and what makes them different. So first and foremost, we are having a discussion about overlay districts. We're not seeing an avenue moving forward where we're going to be changing the base zoning of any property. And this means that properties are going to have 2 different sets of regulations, and they can pick and choose whichever one works for them, either the base zoning or the 3A overlay. The density numbers are approximate, and they're going to change as we continue to modify the boundaries and regulations. So if you come back and say we need to increase this height or lower this height or something like that, that's going to change the model, and that's going to change how everything looks. So you'll see lots of different stuff in these modeling slides and in these regulation slides that say about 15 units or an acre, or have the little tilde thing that shows that we're talking about approximations here, because it's going to change. And we know that for the town as a whole, we have to have this a median gross density of 15 units an acre. That being said, they're not 100% set in stone right now, so we're really talking about things in approximations. And once we actually get things, get the rest of the feedback from you all, get more feedback from the public, that'll allow us to really come down to some final hard numbers that will be able to say this meets the density requirements because it's X number of units here, Y number of units here, Z number of units per acre here, and be able to make all of that work. So understand the numbers are not set in stone right now. And then for the purposes of our discussion tonight, each scenario there's 3 different areas, and we've had conversations at previous meetings about what those are and what they look like. We're going to treat them all as different zoning districts. The number of districts may change in the final version of the zoning, even if the actual land area does not. So for instance, like I said, we're treating all 3 areas separately, even though we're saying, for instance, the first scenario has them all with the same set of regulations. So if that's what gets adopted and that's what we do to move forward, the final version of that could end up looking like this is one overlay district, these are the boundaries of the overlay district, that's where it is. So this is to get ahead of any questions later that say, well, we were presented with 3 districts, why is there only 1 now, or why is there 2? This is the reason why that is. So we're talking about 3 different parts of town, the way that we've broken them down in meetings prior. And we're just going to have a conversation about what those look like. Once it's finalized, it'll likely change a little bit as far as how we talk about them. But for right now, we're talking about them as 3 separate places. So moving right into scenario 1, this is one where all 3 districts work with the same set of regulations. We're looking at density of 15 units per acre and allowed housing types of townhomes, multifamily buildings of 20 units or fewer, and optional mixed use in some areas. And this is a little bit of a visualization of what that looks like. We really made this as bare bones as we can because we're really focused on the density. And throughout all of these different zoning scenarios, District 1 is going to be pink, District 2 is going to be blue, and then District 3 is going to be orange. So District 1 crosses Main Street over here, mostly to the south of Main Street. District 2 has the Clico site and a lot of the RVC residential that's nearby. And then District 3 is the Ann and Hope site. It's the existing multifamily apartment buildings over here and a lot of the surrounding parcels south of Main Street over there. So this is what the map looks like. I don't think this is coming as a surprise to anyone here. We've kind of done a lot of work to get to this point. And what the next slide is going to be something that we're going to spend a little bit more time on to figure out what exactly all of this means, because this is how the regulations are going to look. So we have at the top of all of these the permitted uses, and then underneath is the dimensional requirements. What we're looking at under the permitted uses is you'll see P for permitted. So this would be part of the table that we would work into the zoning bylaw and say attached townhouses permitted in districts 1, 2, and 3, multifamily permitted in districts 1, 2, and 3, and vertical optional mixed use in districts 1, 2, and 3. And we'll figure out kind of what that would look like. We have a minimum lot size in here of 10,000 square feet, a 20% open space requirement. Since we know that these units need to be suitable for families with children, we have them set to be 2 parking spaces per. Front setbacks, rear setbacks, side setbacks between 5 and 10 feet. Maximum height of 4 stories. Maximum lot coverage of 80%. That's just the inverse of the open space. Maximum dwelling units per acre 15, and not capping the number of dwelling units per district and just kind of letting it build out where it needs to build out. So fairly simple. easy for the public to understand, easy to implement, not a whole lot of complicated if this or that kind of language. And if we went this route, this would be something that we could have adopted by, at the local level, it would be able to be approved by the state. And this would just say, you know what, wherever we're going to allow multifamily to be built, it's going to follow these regulations, and that's going to be the beginning and the end of it. So the most simple, straightforward way for these draft regulations is scenario number 1. In scenario number 2, we decide to change things up a little bit. We have District 1, the pink one. It's slightly lower than 10 units per acre, lower density than Districts 2 and 3, and allowed housing types of multifamily or mixed use with up to 10 units per building, so nothing bigger than 10, and then townhomes. Districts 2 and 3 in blue and orange would have density at around 15 units an acre. It would be a little bit more to offset that 10, and we'd have to kind of play with it to see exactly what we could do to get it there and have all the numbers check out. And it would have the multifamily buildings with up to 20 units per building allowed, as well as the townhomes. So this would have potentially larger developments in Districts 2 and 3, and a little bit greater density as well. And the map here doesn't change. The only thing that changes is over in the legend, we see for District 1, less than 10 units an acre, and then kind of around 15, but for sure going to be greater than 15 units an acre for 2 and 3 to offset however much we lower District 1. So if this becomes 8 units per acre, maybe both of these need to become 16 or 17 units an acre in order to get that average of 15 where we need to be at. So the map doesn't change, density changes just a little bit, and then of course the regulation tables change a little bit as well. We see that for all 3 districts, the uses remain permitted: attached townhomes, multifamily, the mixed use. We see in District 1, the minimum lot size decreases from 10,000 square feet to 7,000 square feet. Most things stay the same. The difference is the building height also goes down to 3 stories instead of 4. And the floor area ratio changes a little bit. And the way that we modeled this in the model was 8 units in District 1, 17 units in Districts 2 and 3. And again, those numbers are likely to change a little bit. So very modest tweaking from the first one to say lower density in some areas, slightly higher density in other areas. Moving on to scenario number 3 draft. In District number 1, the pink one, density at or slightly lower than 10 units per acre. So this part doesn't change from scenario 2. A little bit lower density, be able to do what we need to over there to achieve those numbers. And then we have Districts 2A and 2B. And 2A is going to be density at around 15 units an acre, allowing for the multifamily buildings up to 20 units per building and the townhomes. District 2B, which is going to be just the Ann and Hope and the Clico sites, density at around 20 units per acre, allowed multifamily buildings with up to 30 units per building, and potential some additional density bonuses if the building is mixed use with ground floor commercial. So other ways of encouraging additional density, encouraging some other kind of public amenities, things like that. And this is what that looks like. So this changes a little bit. We would have all the same regulations for the light blue, and they would be different from the dark blue ones. And the Clico and the Ann and Hope sites would get the additional density as a result of this. So less than 10 units an acre, around 15 units an acre for 2A, and then around 20 units an acre, give or take, for B. And then, of course, the density bonuses if those get applied. So this is how this regulation table looks, and already we can see it's getting a little bit more complicated. When we look at what we see for the draft scenarios, we see lots of things still permitted the way that they have been. And the difference is if we want to apply a density bonus or give some kind of something to the developers to do something that the town wants to see, that's something that would require special board approval in order to get that special permit to do that. So another layer of checks and balances to make sure people aren't just doing whatever is self-serving, and that there's an opportunity for public hearings and the public to voice their concerns about what that could look like. because we know that any additional density bonuses for this going above 20 units an acre is something that I think a lot of neighbors might have something to say about. So that's why that's there. Regulation-wise, not really a whole lot changes other than just what we allow. So we see the 7,000 square foot, at least for District 1, not a whole lot changes. So 7,000 square feet, 80% coverage, 3 stories height, FAR of 3, 8 dwelling units per acre. That's all the same stuff as last time. District 2A, which again is the big everything that encompasses the rest of what we talked about, except for Clico and Ann and Hope. We're looking at a lot size of minimum 1,500 square feet. All the setbacks are the same. The open space and the coverage is the same. Allowable building height of 4 stories and 17 dwelling units an acre is the way this one's modeled. And again, those numbers are going to change a little bit. And then for the Ann and Hope and Clico sites, minimum lot size of 30,000 square feet, so much bigger than what we've been talking about. We still see the same open space requirements, the same maximum lot coverage requirements, a higher floor area ratio of 3.5, 20 dwelling units per acre, and the setbacks remain the same throughout all of these. And we could do things like have a potential provision that says attached townhouses are only permitted as the housing type for parcels abutting Curb Street or something like that. So we would be able to say, if you want to build exactly here and we want to keep this form, this is what this needs to look like. But if you want to build something that's a little bit more substantial, it needs to be set a little bit back from this, the main road and done a little bit different with. So these are the 3 spots where we kind of ended up. And what I'd like to do now is kind of just turn it back over to the committee, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts. We got a couple prompts to kind of frame the way that we're thinking about this. Number 1, do you have any kind of just general thoughts, either regarding the approach that we took or the results that we've come to, making sure that we're putting everything into action and motion the way that you all hopefully intended and envisioned when we last talked about it? Are there any zoning regulations that we want to modify? And what I think needs to be the biggest part of this discussion is, do we want to change any of these districts moving forward? So this is where I'm at, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring this up with the map so we can see what it looks like. And happy to turn it back over to the chair at this point. If anybody wants me to kind of move backwards or forwards with slides or anything like that, I'm happy to do so. So looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I'm willing to open it up for dialogue here, so feel free to ask questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So in all the zones, a 4-story buildings permitted? Just one, right? Just one of the parcels?
Was that question, where would we be allowing 4-story buildings?
Yes.
So the way that we have it right now is that under scenarios 1, 2, and 3, we would allow for 4-story buildings. Scenario 3 would allow it in 2A right here. So all of the light blue, and then also talking about allowing 4 stories under scenario 2 for the blue and the orange districts. And then under scenario 1, we would be allowing 4 stories uniformly throughout these districts.
How does that work with a 10-unit maximum per building? Would it be better to have a building of 15 units and cut down the 4-story to 3-story? I don't
know if I would necessarily say one is better or worse. This is just the way that it was gone ahead and modeled. And part of the challenge with this is that because the units do need to be suitable for families with children, they need to be a little bit larger than what we see with a lot of typical efficiency in 1-bedroom apartment units that are so commonly built right now. So this was the way that we put it together and modeled it to have it make sense there. Are there strong feelings about the building height from the committee?
I was thinking more on how many units per floor. So if you have 10 units and you have 3 or 4 stories, I don't know how that works.
If you have 10 units and 3 units per story, that would probably be 3, 3, 3 and 1, or maybe 3, 3, 2 and 2, something like that. That would be, a lot of that would depend on kind of what the parcel shape looks like and how much room they feel like they have to build once they figure out the parking and stuff like that. But that's going to be something that's going to be a little project specific, and that's if they were completely building it out, that's the way that they would go. And I would imagine that they would try to find ways to make sure that they can get the most amount of units they can in there. So I think it would likely be 3322 or 3331 or something like that.
I'll just finish with, I just think from a construction perspective, if you had 15 units per building, it would probably work better. But that's all.
Yeah, Craig?
Yeah, I'm going to take a step back out of the weeds a little bit. I thought we were fairly clear that we, at least Nicole and I think, and I think a few others, were concerned about the Ann and Hope and what you keep calling CLECO, but it's actually the GAF site,
Right.
being turned into part of this project in a significant way. I mean, that was our prime commercial spot. I did like when you got to the last option. If you could, so if you go to your last slide, scenario 3, yeah, that one. If you require that the dark blue be commercial on the bottom and residential on top, I'd be more in favor of it. But I think we were pretty clear that we were concerned about losing prime commercial space for housing. I think it's a great idea if you can require it to be commercial on the bottom. I don't know what Nicole's thoughts are, but speaking for myself, I think that goes a long way to solve that issue. But that was the other piece. And I'd also push a little, and also the apartments that we have back in there that you've overlaid also. I thought we'd voice some concern about having that be a large parcel that can be torn down in one fell swoop and rebuilt into something else. You know, it might really cause a lot of development really quickly. I don't recall if anybody else remembers those conversations or
Yes,
thought about
yes,
that.
absolutely, yeah.
But it seems to me like you spent a lot of time listening, but very little time drawing what we discussed. I don't know if other people have been giving you other feedback or you've heard from other groups or anything else, but our concerns were we didn't want this development to all of a sudden turn that, in that map, right where your cursor is, that parcel into a large development overnight, which it's owned by one owner pretty much, and it could be a tear down.
It is a tear down at this moment.
Well, it should be a tear down, let's start with that, but we didn't want it to be an immediate, I mean, we've got some issues with phasing this project over time, and I could see that being turned into something, if the market's right, in a couple of years, you know, and really hitting us hard. I do like the idea that if it's required with those dark blue parcels being commercial on the bottom, I think that'd be a huge benefit to the town. Nicole might have other views on, thoughts on it, but at least that's a step in the right direction. But otherwise, at least the Ann and Hope parcel, I thought we were trying to exclude from the development because we did want to keep it for some type of commercial base. Having said that, the part labeled CLECO, which is really GAF, if that was taken out of the dark blue, that might be, you know, and turned into regular blue, that might be another option too. I don't know that we'd require commercial on that one. But certainly the one that abuts Main Street, I'd really push hard to have it require commercial on the first floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the biggest concern, like you said, that we discussed. We don't want to lose what little land we have for commercial development there. You know, and we don't want to turn it all over to apartments. And I think that was kind of the feedback I heard anyway from our public forum at the school, that people love the idea of being able to walk to the stores and have that commercial space, but that it wouldn't be all apartments or, you know, housing downtown, like on that particular spot of land.
And again, that goes back to the problem that the apartments cause us. That's just one developer, one owner selling it for immediate development. I liked the idea of the small parcels in the back there, in that light blue area, that it would take a while to acquire enough to do something, so it would just naturally, you know, stagger the development over time. I can't see exactly how those spots are contiguous, so maybe if it was shaded a little bit or something. I don't know if you got all that area marked or just certain streets in that area, but the gist of it's right in that boy, it's hard to read from here. The light blue, the gist is right.
Where exactly are we talking about?
I'm talking about Van Cleek and all those roads back behind what you have labeled as CLECO.
Okay, so all of this back here.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. Yeah,
Okay.
that works real well for me. The pink works real well for me, under whatever scenario we go with. You know, I think that there's tweaking about heights, lot sizes, and all that, but conceptually, I think you nailed those two areas. I have concerns about the apartments that are that area right there, and concerns about the Ann and Hope being turned into entirely apartment and not any commercial. So if it was mandated commercial, you'd alleviate a lot of my concerns.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
Something else that we can do, especially as it relates to this apartment complex down here, we could work something into the zoning bylaw that talks about how many units somebody is allowed to have per lot. And I think we could be fairly generous with that because there's a handful of large lots and primarily small lots. So it would be a situation where whatever that cap is on the number of units per lot, that would really only apply to a handful of parcels and not others unless people are trying to really buy up a lot of land and assemble something. So if we're concerned that someone's going to just tear this down and say, I got free reign to build some giant thing, we could cap however many we would want that to be and just kind of leave that be, if that would help alleviate some of those concerns.
That would
So
potentially be
that's-
more attractive. That would address more of what I was concerned about, because I don't want to see a giant thing. Although I do believe we need the housing, I do support this whole concept quite a bit. I just don't, it'll hit the town pretty hard if it comes in overnight. You know, it's got to be a phased process. And I think that that development is ripe for being a giant apartment complex pretty quickly, if we're not careful with our zoning.
You mean it'll hit the town pretty hard in what respect by having so many,
Population.
increase the population
Increase the
all at once?
population,
Yeah.
Okay.
We won't have time to phase in school, we won't have time to phase in fire, police. There's a lot of things to consider. I was envisioning the slow growth where some of them start to percolate into the pink area, start to percolate into the light blue area across Main Street by
Sure, yeah.
by GAF, you know, that area.
Yeah, those would potentially go a lot slower than, you know,
Yeah.
if that parcel is a tear down with a big developer that comes in
Yeah.
and just does a big project, for sure. Yeah.
Although the location is out of sightline, it'd be the least objectionable to a lot of people.
Correct.
You know?
Correct, but it is the biggest parcel.
Right.
And it's already residential and it's
Yeah.
tired and kind of.
Oh, yeah, it needs
Ready
something.
to go.
I don't think there's a problem with
Yeah.
that.
But, you know, I think you also have to keep in mind, if you want to support a commercial downtown, you need the housing units to support that. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not, you
Yeah.
have a lot of commercial around, so what supports the commercial part of things is the housing. And the part about the area where Van Cleek is a good area, but I mean, in the middle of a housing crisis, that's like dripping new homes in there. I mean, that's gonna be a long, long time.
Now, what
Because if you read the recent study by the National Association of Home Builders that Wentworth did and MIT did, even if we implement this plan and we were to put areas where you could get these units, it's not anywhere near enough.
Right.
No.
Oh, I get that, and that's why I was comfortable with the four-story zoning and the dark blue with the commercial underneath. I thought that zoning above it would give you the ability to support the commercial below it.
Right.
And that would be the immediate hit, but I just know that if all of a sudden, the two dark blue and the apartments area where the cursor is now were built out, that would hit with a lot of homes really, really fast before we have time to address the infrastructure needs that are going to be required for it.
Nicole?
We have, John, just to, I'm sure you're probably aware of this, but Millis currently has a multi-use zoning district overlay, which goes from 150, from Plain Street west.
Yeah.
We have been discussing extending it. At one point in time, there was a separate type of overlay down over that area, and it was removed, partly because it was completely confusing. And we are in the process of looking at extending it now east so that it would include at least Ann and Hope, if not Ann and Hope, and again, what you have listed as Clico. My concern with marking those in your scenario 3, those two dark blue areas, and marking those as required to maintain commercial business, as opposed to having that be part of our multi-use district, is that this zoning that we're discussing today is by right. I have a problem with allowing commercial business, a commercial and residential business combined to go in there by right, because when you're dealing with commercial business, office business, we have issues of how many employees are you anticipating? How many parking spaces for employees? How many parking spaces for visitors? Those are things that all are going to need to be reviewed and required under special permit. So if this is by right, the town is going to lose a lot of that oversight. And I use oversight as opposed to control, because we have these laws in place, these bylaws in place now, and I can tell you, every single development that comes in, our engineer says, yep, you don't have enough parking. They, look at the rules, it's in the book, and they still try to squeak away, less parking than necessary. So that making a different district for Ann and Hope and GAF that is required to be commercial and residential, but allowing it by right, I think is going to create a massive headache that let me put it this way, it's not going to get recommended at town meeting by planning board. Planning board will advise against it. And where zoning regulations come into play, a lot of people look to including the FinCom, they often look to what the planning board is going to say, and making that a by right is creating a big open door for headaches and for major issues. My other point I just wanted to bring up, our current zoning right now, our current height regulation in Millis is 2.5 stories. So while I understand you can only get so many units, multi-bedroom units, on an acre of land or a quarter of acre of land by 2 acres, by 2.5 stories. I think in some of these neighborhoods, if we're allowing 4 stories, and you have, the neighborhoods up in Van Cleek, you have a little cape here and a little cape here and a little cape here that just barely make 2 stories. They're not even 2 full stories. And now you're going to put a 4-story building. You're really, and I don't know if or how we can adjust that, but I think you're really going to really change the whole layout of these neighborhoods. You're going to change the whole character of it. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't live in one of those districts, but I can imagine saying, okay, I've got a little cape, and I've had this cape for 50 years because a lot of the people over there are, they're longtime families. And if you're putting in a 3-story building, triple decker, you can tell that I grew up in the city. I know they don't call them triple deckers anymore. But if you're putting in a triple decker next to a cape, that's one thing. If you're putting in a 4-story building next to a bunch of capes or splits, that's going to be a huge difference. And now you're talking about, how are you affecting the light of these people's homes? How are you affecting... a lot of that's going to come into play.
I think that, I can't recall, but because they went through them quick and I don't have the handouts. But were there 4 stories recommended, allowed in the recommended to be allowed in the Van Cleek area?
In the light blue.
3?
It was 3 was in, in the first, and I think, if we can go back to the first slide, I think in the first slide it was 3, but I think some of those were saying 4 stories.
So in
that's
scenario number 1, we have uniform building height of 4 stories.
Yeah.
In scenario number 2, We have 3 stories in District 1
There we go.
and then 4 stories in Districts 2 and 3. And then in scenario number 3, 3 stories in District 1, 4 stories in District 2A, 5 stories in District 2B.
Can we flip
so-
back to scenario 2 for a second? Because, can I see the map? Because I think that scenario 2, with the exclusion of the Ann and Hope site, with that zoning with the 3s and the areas where 3s are, that might be a consideration that, because if we can't, if listening to Nicole's concern about, special permits and traffic and parking, all that, that's not what I've ever worked with, so I'll defer on that, and I'll agree with you on that. I do look towards them.
Sure. And,
But I
just
think
so
my
everyone-
concern goes back to losing the commercial at the Ann and Hope. So if there's another place to, and I'll give up on the GAF, because quite honestly, that's back in there. That could be part of the neighborhood or part of the commercial, depending which way you face it.
Right,
Yeah.
the GAF property, I think, while I am not a fan of having multiple overlay districts on a
Yeah.
particular lot, I think GAF, if you have the multifamily overlay and you have the mixed-use development overlay on GAF, that would be fine.
Yeah.
The other point I want to, just for our purposes, on the yellow district, not all of that concerns me because, and I'm unfortunately too far away. I wish we were able to look at the parcels. I wish we had had it in front of us. But where that where the road comes in and then it does the double loop, from what we're looking at to the right, those are condos. Those are not apartments.
Okay.
Yes, right around, I think, in there. And I think so some of those lots are condos. So because they are condos, while the land is owned by the condo association, every single unit is individually owned. So
So it behaves like the Van Cleek area?
yes, but actually even less so, because one unit owner couldn't turn his or her condo
Right.
into multifamily because it has to go by the regulations. So
This is the apartment area?
those are the apartments. That definitely we want to cut out. I mean, realistically, if there was, if you want to take it to as far down the road as you can, if there, God forbid, if there's a fire and it comes in and it wipes out that entire condo complex and the residents decide we're not going to take the insurance and rebuild, we're going to pay off mortgages and we're going to sell the property, the association's going to sell it, then that could be an issue. But that's highly unlikely. So in that way, you're kind of applying land that most likely is never going to fall under this district, which could kind of reduce the numbers. But that parcel right where you have your finger, those are apartment buildings. That's one owner, and that was in particular what we were talking about. I don't want to see.
And looking at it on that size, it makes me less concerned, because I was looking at the whole thing as
Well, I believe there are 3 different,
Yeah.
there's one that I know is condo, one that I know is apartment, and the third would have to check with the
Yeah.
assessors.
So I want to
But-
leave enough for some decent development, but I didn't want it to be that entire
Exactly.
area.
I mean, I'd like
Yeah.
to be able to, I see having the position, because most likely in Millis, you're probably not going to have a developer that's going to come in and buy up 4 people's homes,
Yeah.
and then build a 20-unit development. You're going to have, and that's because of that, and because so much of this applies to small lots, I think we need to make sure that we're not unduly burdening the neighborhood for those people that currently live there and are not turning their homes into
Right.
into these developments. Because, like I said, if you're in a split, you're less than 2 full floors. You don't have 2.5 stories. If you have an older Cape, that house is not reaching 2.5 stories. It's more like 1 3/4. So now you put a four-story building next to it. Now you're affecting their sunlight, which could affect the wind. I mean, there's going to be a lot of changes to the two abutters, depending upon which way the street goes and which way the light goes, and you're placing a lot of burden on those neighbors. So I think going from 2.5 to 3 stories is fine. I would like to see, and I don't know, like I said, I don't know the numbers. You can, if you've got, and even if we're dealing 15 units per acre, you can only put so many units on the first floor, per floor, you can, on the ground, so if you have to go up. But I think, especially in that blue area, I mean, I shouldn't say that, it's the same in the pink area. You're placing a burden on the abutters.
Can I just to try to frame it
Yeah.
as a suggestion, I'm not sure it's a good suggestion, so I want to start with that. I'm just trying to process everything I'm hearing. I'm hearing the 3-story max in what's basically what we consider neighborhoods now.
Oh,
That's the apartment.
So,
Yeah.
no, the apartments,
No, this is the apartments. Yeah.
Okay, so,
John, what was the minimum lot size in that blue area? Was that,
okay, so then,
yeah.
was that
these
20,000?
These are the condos.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd rather
Sorry,
stick to just the concepts right now, and then we'll come back to the lot
10,000.
sizes, because I think that's the
10,000
second
for
piece.
scenario
Right.
2.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
scenario 3, it goes up to
All right,
15,000.
I had the locations
Yeah.
backwards.
So Nicole, my suggestion might be 3-story in what we consider the residential areas. That's the pink and the blue back in Van Cleek in that area. That addresses your concern. Take Ann and Hope off the table and reserve it for commission. Do your
Yep.
overlay district with your special permit that you want there. GAF labeled as Clico. I would almost be fine with that being a 4-story building because it doesn't abut anybody, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that area could be 4-story. And then back in the apartment area, back around Stony Brook and all that area, I think we can get creative with that and come up, because I wouldn't mind seeing the I don't know how big it is. I'm
Yeah.
just brainstorming.
And
Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah.
Jody has just pointed out to me, I've got the locations backwards.
I wouldn't mind some of that being I don't know how many units we could get in, how it has to be zoned, but if some of it was one owner that could be turned over quickly to put something nice in there, because it wouldn't be that big of a net change to the town, because you already have apartments there, it might just dramatically improve it. So that might be a consideration, and then if you're correct with your
That's a which
condos,
location?
the Stony Brook apartment
Stony Brook,
side.
okay, yeah.
The Stony Brook apartment
Right
side.
there, yeah.
I think we have them backwards, yeah. So that's the apartments, yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
if.
And then the Stony Brook condo side,
if that's part of it.
maybe treat it like the other stuff.
You know,
What's your
maybe
thought be on
get
the
this-
Stony Brook condo side, Nicole?
I'm sorry.
Treat the apartment side 4 stories to allow
The
some
apartment
development.
side, I have fine,
Yeah.
I think would work with
Yeah,
the
4
4
stories on the apartment side.
And going back to the GAF parcel,
Yeah.
I don't know, Herman Shoe, I don't know where that 40B, is that gone?
It's
We're
out
still
there?
waiting
Yeah.
on
Yeah,
the,
it's-
so
It's a PFAS.
that's going to be,
That'll be 4 stories.
is that only 4 stories?
It might be 5.
I think it's 5
story.
story.
Yeah.
I think it's
4
5 stories, it's
on
4
the
or 5
apartment.
stories, so I think doing that over in Clico would be, what they have listed as
Right.
Clico, that the 4 stories would be okay.
That gives us a little bit there, and then we can get, and on the condo side, since it's going to take a while to acquire, treat it like the 3-story, so see what we can get for numbers based on that, and you tell us what we'd have to do on the
But-
condo side.
Yeah, so going back, actually, Jody was just pointing out that I have the zones backwards. So,
I know my GIS.
I don't know if John can.
There you
see
go.
what I'm doing. So this here is the apartments, but the apartments.
Right where your cursor is are the
Right where your
apartments.
cursor is, John, that, right in there are the apartments. However, to the lower right this whole area is part of this lot, but it is currently undeveloped. It's undeveloped.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if there's, I don't know why. I don't know if it's just they never
Yeah.
bothered, or if there's wet or something. But if that entire lot, because this little double loop, that square, that's the loop is the road. So that square, those are the condos. And then I think, Jody, these are more apartments or
I think this
condos?
is-
Yes, those are apartments
These
as
are
well.
apartments, so you've got apartments here, but this lot in particular, if that entire lot is
Yeah.
developable, you could easily be looking at, I don't know, 200 units going up.
Yeah, we have to be careful around that area, and you know our concerns. If we can come up with the numbers that we need with some kind of zoning restrictions and height restrictions
What is
and,
that, what's the?
and things in that area, I wouldn't mind
Which one, the
improving
small
those
or the big one?
apartments.
No, the apartments.
Because, well, and the other part, Nicole, is if we pull those apartments out, we're losing the people and then bringing back somewhat more. It's not a.
But currently,
Yeah.
there's only, that's 157 acres
Okay, oh,
Wow.
for that one lot.
Oh, wait, it must
No.
be combined
No.
with the
No.
other.
Can't
Is
be,
it?
Yeah.
can't be.
Yeah, it's got to be a
No.
combined rec,
That's-
it's a combined card.
That's got to be, yeah. But, I mean, my point is, that those apartments that are in there now are only 2 stories. So
Okay.
even if you use the exact the
double
footprint
it.
that is there, you're doubling
Right.
the residency.
so maybe that becomes a 3-story and then it's, but whatever.
I-
I'm curious to see some more proposals now that we've
Yeah.
given some feedback on it.
You know, the other thing I think we all have to keep in mind is, when you look at your buyers, 40% of your buyers, your millennials and Gen Zs, what's attracting them to places like Millis, walkability and closeness to, the shopping and entertainment, but also the new construction that's being built. It's so much better for the environment. It's so much healthier for them to live in. So, those areas, I think they'll go up in value, like around the Van Cleek area, and I think people will buy them, and I think people would be happy to sell them because that is where the market is in new construction. New construction is where it's at because, it's just so fabulous right now. Whereas ratings next year go to
There's a couple
42.
points that I want to bring up so that we all make sure that we're working with the same set of facts here. Number one, like I said previously, we could go ahead and put a cap into the model that says this is how many units per lot you're allowed to build. And if we wanted to have a situation where they would need a special permit if they wanted to exceed that number, that's something that we could work into the zoning bylaw as well. So if we wanted to have some kind of restriction in place that prevented all of this lot from being built out the way that I'm hearing some of the concerns tonight, we could certainly have some safeguards against that. That's number one. Number two, even if we were to see a situation where the existing Stony Brook apartments were to be torn down and rebuilt exactly with the same kind of form that they have, I don't know what their square footage is. I don't know how many bedrooms those apartments currently have. But knowing that the regulations for the 3A have to allow for units that are suitable with families with children, I'm very confident in saying that they will likely be larger than the apartments that are already there. So that would not be a strict 1-to-1 swap. It would be a little bit less. I can't tell you exactly how much less, but we would have fewer apartments there. Number three, just sort of pulling this back out to a little bit more big picture, our goal for tonight is not to decide on which one of these we like best. We want to take all 3 of these scenarios to the public and get their thoughts on what they feel they're most comfortable with. And then we'll have another conversation with the committee to figure out, okay, what do we actually take and put together and see what happens. It's very possible that the public will favor one of these scenarios greatly. It's possible that they could have a lot of mixed results and it'll be really turned back over to you guys to make a more final decision on it. But where we're at right now is we want to get these to the point where we're comfortable saying we are okay getting public feedback on what these look like, knowing that the numbers are going to change a little bit and some other stuff is likely going to change a little bit. And that's why I don't want to focus too much on the regulatory side and a little bit more so on the boundary side. That's going to be a lot of what folks are going to be looking at. Lastly, right now, there is not a mechanism to acquire mixed use. If that changes, I will let you all know immediately,
Okay.
and we can schedule a meeting to kind of have a conversation about that and what do we do about it and where do we go. But for right now, we can't require anything to be mixed use and still have it be part of the 3A modeling that we're doing here. So anything that we'd require that, we'd have to exclude that property, which adds another host of challenges trying to model and put things together. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of those 4 things and that that's continuing to inform the discussion that we have here.
I think hearing what you're saying, I think that, and hearing what we're saying, I hope you're hearing what we're saying, that we would really be uncomfortable with more than 3 stories in the 2 areas that are clearly residential. I wouldn't want to take something to the public and get something back that I'm going to be opposed to on the select board and Nicole's going to be opposed to on the planning board. What good does that do us? The second piece is GAF probably, I'm sorry, N and Hope should
Has to
probably not be included as an option then. I know that provides some more challenges for you, but taking something that neither the planning board or the select board is going to be, at least a third of the select board isn't going to be in favor of, is problematic to even present as an option. Now, knowing that, if you can tweak the numbers back into the apartment areas that we talked about, you know, that other orange areas and play with that, that might give us the option, because that is not the visible area. That is an area where we could have some development if we took the other one off. I'm less concerned about something in there that is taller, except for the timing. The timing's what concerns me. But conceptually, from a building standpoint, that's the area where I wouldn't mind seeing something with a little more density, keeping Main Street open for the mixed use and the commercial on the bottom, but not as part of this project, since we can't require it. The whole, what you call CLECO, which we call GAF, that whole area could be 4 stories, I think we've said in our comments on this, too. So I hope that offsets some of the N and Hope loss that we had between that.
Did we get some feedback from a member of the public looking at the area that was from, say, Dover Road towards the Medfield line, asking if we could include some of those parcels in this?
I can address that. We did have some, a request from the owners of Woodland LLC, which is north of Cottage, south of Railroad. It's the other side of the Woodlands development. That's a single-family development now. They asked if this committee could consider adding that area. It's 52 acres. Adding that area to the 3A.
Can you pull that up and show me where it is?
Yeah, what street are we talking
So
from where to where?
that's
It is
south of Environmental
north of
Drive.
Cottage.
Isn't it
South
behind
of,
J.
Ring
Williams
Road,
Heights,
it's-
back in there? Behind J. William Heights?
Well, this.
J. William.
Heights,
Yes.
right?
Is
Yes,
it-
It's behind there.
It's
Right.
undeveloped now. Buddy Curry Street is at the
Yeah.
west end of it.
All right, so the subdivision that was, that there was, they did come to get a special permit up in that area for
Yes.
a subdivision. Is
Yeah.
that being dropped? Is that the same, I think that's
I
the
don't know if
same,
it's being dropped or
I
not.
think that's the same property.
They came to the planning board to basically extend what was
Right.
to its east, right?
Oh, yeah, J. William Heights, I
Yeah,
see.
so
Okay.
it was, this is.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, it encompasses all of this,
Okay,
or a lot of it. I
On the
mean,
map that we have up
Yeah.
kind of
now,
listed here, some of it
it's,
is left.
it is to the right, above, go north, and then go a little bit right there to the north of that, right? Right around there, yeah.
Yeah, so where my
Okay.
cursor is at now, these are the tracks.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the
And just,
parcels that we're talking about are these guys right back here that's kind of
That's right.
nestled in behind all this existing single-family residential.
That's right. It's
The
about
residents
eight-
of Cottage.
Eight parcels or so. One,
Not a
two,
great
three,
spot.
four,
No.
five, six,
No,
seven.
because
I think
the-
these spots work
it's
well. I don't think that
swampy
spot
and
works.
So,
Yeah.
part of the problem, there is currently a special permit for a subdivision in there. I don't know what's happening with it, because there really hasn't been any, I think there's a lot of question. During that subdivision, public hearings, there were almost all the residents from Cottage Ave area were there because those roads, excuse me, are so narrow. And they were supposed to be single-family homes going up in there, and I want to say,
Yeah.
I'd have to look at my back files, but I want to say it was like 38 units or something to that effect, 42 units. But those were single-family homes. And the traffic that was going to generate, all of those roads back there are extremely narrow. If you have people that park in front of their own home, you can't get two cars down those roads. And it's not the developers, the neighbors were saying, well, if they're going to do that, we want the developer to widen the streets. It's not a developer's responsibility to repair or improve what the town owns. And if they own property, they have the right to do that. If you're putting in multifamily dwellings, the increase in traffic will be double or triple. And in that layout, the way they were, the access,
It doesn't,
oh,
yeah.
the access point was either going to be coming out and going like through the side, no, it was going to be coming out here like by Winter Street, or which is going to cause traffic within the subdivision, or there is actually a right-of-way from those lands down, and when you're coming out of Village Street at 109, down at that end, if you look directly across Village Street, it looks like a driveway. That's actually, there is road access. So that was the proposed direct access to 109. And the issue of traffic at that point was horrendous with 34 to 38 single-family homes. If we're potentially putting 100, 150,
Yeah.
the traffic issue you're creating in that area, those roads can't handle it. You're going to end up having fatalities there.
Yeah, I
Because
would
you've
hold
got
off
little,
on it.
all in those neighborhoods, you've got little homes with their starter homes, you've got young children riding their bikes up and down the street, and as much as I think looking on the map, that property would be great, because it would be set back and you're not really, the construction is not affecting the abutters, unit by unit. I think the traffic congestion that you would be you'd be creating back there, and unlike with a subdivision, now if it's by right, you don't have, again, the town has no control on what they can do with directing traffic, with what roads are going to be in, what roads are going to be out, how a developer would create it, to what roads they're going to have entrances. So that's my only, I'm not saying we don't look at it, but that could present.
Well, so
I like
maybe-
these options right now that we have. I think we're a little late in the game to be throwing one more in. And these lay out nicely for our existing downtown area without
what
creating
people
a
want.
traffic issue.
I
If
also,
we can make it work with these lots, with the modifications we've put forward, and still achieve our goal, I'd rather just keep pursuing that at this point.
I also want
Well,
this board, excuse me, I want this board to be aware of, not that I believe this would be spot zoning, because it's an overlay district, we're not changing the underlying, but there would be, especially if we've had one property owner come and ask, can you include this?
Sure.
And we even
Yeah.
consider it.
Right.
If that's the case, I got a developer that's a client, that's 2 blocks up on Plain Street that was waiting to see where this is going to be. He's going to come forward and he's going to request, well, can you extend it here to include my property? And you're going to have developers, you're going to have people doing that, owners doing that left and right.
So Nicole,
Right.
just so I'm clear, you're saying if we stick with what we got, we're pretty safe? If we
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
including others, we're not?
I think once you take a request from one
Yeah.
property owner,
I kind of feel
we
the
got to
same
take
way.
them
Oh,
all.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I misunderstood where it was, number one. And, if it was a budding Main Street, I think that would perhaps make more sense.
Yeah.
Having it not abut Main Street, that's an entirely different, kettle of fish here.
The only thing, though, this is really, I think, is, I really don't understand why we would exclude Ann and Hope if there weren't the controls in place. You don't have you're not adding a lot of traffic. It could be a really nice common for the town, a place where people could get together socially. You're not having people having to use their cars because they could walk across the street and shop and that kind of stuff. I really think it's a mistake. I understand your concerns, I really do, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. But I think if the right controls are in place, like, what they put on the street, how it looks architecturally and that kind of stuff, I just think it's wrong to take a parcel that size that could gobble up some units and just take it off the table.
I guess my concern is, first off, this has to pass a town meeting. Secondly, that thing sitting on Main Street when people drive into Medway, and it's a beautiful building, I like what I see there, it's just big. If people are envisioning that coming to Millis, this doesn't pass.
That's not going to happen, though.
Well, we can say that all day long, but but if that's a possibility, people are convinced that's the direction this is headed already.
Then we have to tell them it isn't.
Well,
Then you have to
and-
tell
and
them
also I
that's
think
not
the-
something you're going to do.
Well, I think the overlay zoning that we're putting on top of it, that Nicole's talking about, if we extend that down, we achieve the same net goal without having the concerns the planning board's representative is putting forth, that, the parking and all those other issues. I mean, I don't think we lose the ability to have residential on top and commercial on the bottom. I think we just don't make it by right. In fact, I think at the same time we do this, we should extend the zoning for that overlay.
And as John said, if
Yeah.
we're going to, there are no components in the MBTA bylaw, law that allows us to require commercial.
But why require commercial? Millis has been trying to acquire commercial since the 40s. I mean, we're 10 miles from 495 and 10 miles from 128. I mean, what commercial entities are dying to come here? I mean, there's plenty of other spaces for them, but where there's a housing crisis, to eliminate a parcel like that, I think is just a mistake, but I'm not going to belabor that
And the only way
issue,
we
but-
could afford to eliminate that parcel is if we can replicate the number of houses we need elsewhere. So that's the consideration.
Yeah.
But I am so I don't think we'd be negatively impacting the total number of houses we brought in, because we're required to bring in a certain number. I want to see if we can get to that number without including it, and then do the overlay zoning on top of it. I think that, and if that means increasing the density back in Stony Brook area, where it's not as visible, where there's already housing there, and if we control that so it doesn't explode, to take us beyond our manageable limits of a sustained growth, not an immediate next 5-year, 10-year growth. That I think achieves our goals.
Would it be possible, through you, Madam Chair, to ask if we could get copies of these? Because it would be helpful to have something like
Oh, yeah.
up close, and like would be to be able to use that again as a reference.
Yeah, John, could you provide us copies of your slides, after the meeting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Because we also have half of the board is not.
Right.
Yeah,
committee
yeah.
is not here.
Yeah.
The challenge to gather
And-
us in
And
the
if you
summer.
could send those out prior to the meetings too,
Yes.
because we've got a TV here that's not quite big enough to see everything you're putting up there. That's why we keep getting up and walking up to look at it. I follow along beautifully on handouts. Okay. And I jot notes, and I draw lines.
The other request that I had, not so much of a request, I had a discussion with the owners of Ann and Hope. And I think they're fine with remaining commercial and all. There is a kind of a 2-acre ear on the Ann and Hope property. It's attached to it. It runs what would be the extension of, I think it's Lavender Street.
Yeah.
It's 2 acres, and I think they wanted,
On the right side where the unit,
to the left, keep on the left. Yeah, I think
area?
that's-
Yeah.
I think that's it. And that, they were asking me if that could be turned into residential. And nothing is there now, it's behind Rockies. It's all that area behind Rockies right now.
Conceptually, without knowing exactly what's on it now,
Right.
Yeah.
I think that the light blue zoning crossing over to that little spot might be a nice little pickup.
Yeah.
Unless it's just listed as land.
I don't know, yeah, it's just land
Undeveloped
right now.
yeah.
But we don't have, it's,
I'm trying
well,
to
on
get-
the
I'm
property
trying to
card,
get
it's
some of
listed as
those
Zone
owners
L.
involved,
We don't have a
so.
Zone L.
But I see it on the map. It exists.
Oh, I'm not saying the property doesn't exist. The
Yeah.
property exists, but I'm saying that it's listed on the property card as being a Zone
Well,
L.
let's fix that too.
Well, you know, there are actually, surprisingly, there are multiple property cards that have zones that do not,
Yeah.
That don't exist.
that no longer exist.
So let's take this opportunity to address both of those things.
Shall I just click on parcels? and-
Yeah. No, just the ones we're interested in. The other ones can happen later. But I don't know,
I
is
do
there
this in
problem,
my
do you
pastime.
think there's an issue with changing that to the light blue? That little 2-acre chunk? Because when I talk about Ann and Hope, I don't even think about that little chunk right there.
No, because that is, it's within that area, it's not on Main Street.
Right.
Because we were talking about
Right,
having this,
the
about
facing-
not
yeah.
having this right on Main Street to potentially take away commercial that we do have.
Right.
So it has access
And-
from Lavender Street?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we go, we got you a little bit of something to offset. And honestly, if that's 2 acres with nothing on it in Zone L, once we figure out what it should be, that could be a quick development piece if somebody, that could be an early implementer.
So, John, as I understand it, you're looking for feedback on these different scenarios, though, kind of in which direction do we want you to focus your efforts? Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
What we're going to be doing is taking each of these 3 scenarios to the public and asking them for their thoughts on if they like them, don't like them, what they would have us change, etc.
Okay.
And what we're asking for tonight is this committee comfortable with these 3 scenarios as presented together, public feedback. Now, that being said, if there's also other more specific bits of feedback that you all would like to see, we can certainly include that. So, for instance, we could have the Ann and Hope site and have a question in the online open house that says, here's the site. You all see it all the time. You drive by it constantly. It's right in the middle of the town. Would you only want this to be incorporated if we could require mixed use? Would you be okay if it was entirely residential? Do you have other thoughts on how we could make this work? Things like that. So there's lots of ways we could get a little bit more specific with some sites if they're kind of hot button issue sites. But really what we want to do here is get this to the point where we can go to the public and say, what are your thoughts on that? And then reconcile the feedback we get from them. And we'll take that to our next committee meeting and make a final decision on, okay, this is how we really need to tweak things, and then get a final zoning bylaw that we can take to town meeting.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, from the first meeting, we've talked about not including Ann and Hope, at least Nicole and I have. And I think others have said that too. I think that, I'm not sure you're hearing us about that. I think that including Ann and Hope on this is not what we're looking for. I think that that's a problem. I think that Nicole's idea of an overlay extension makes sense to achieve kind of the same thing. But, I mean, I'm of 2 minds. If we could take it to the town and have them discuss it, but it's going to be very, very hard for me to vote to include a plan that includes Ann and Hope. So do we want to even show that?
May I
Yeah.
make a request?
Yeah.
Because we have several members who are not here, and because the way this is listed now, we can't see what all of the
Yeah.
actual parcels are. Could we, if John can submit these 3 to the committee members, including those who are not here?
Yeah.
Let the committee members form provide their comments, whether we bring them to a meeting the 1st of September, when vacation time is over, or we submit them all to John and meet again in September before we go to the public, because I
like that option.
don't feel like we're ready, my personal opinion,
Yeah.
I'm not ready to to go forward to the public
Yeah.
with this.
And-
I would rather
can't,
have
I
both.
don't,
I'm with
I
Nicole,
can't see
yeah.
half of the
Yeah.
lots, because
I think we need to.
I brought my reading glasses, and I should have brought my distance glasses, and sadly, I have 852
I have
pairs of
both right here,
glasses.
and it just isn't working.
Madam Chair, comments would have to, I think comments could go to John, but they cannot go to any of the.
They can go to you,
amongst-
and you
or
can
they
forward
come
them to
me.
John.
Right.
They
Yeah.
cannot come.
I would say we send them to you, and you send them to John. They can
Yeah.
also go to
Yeah.
the chair, and the chair can send them.
Yeah, but it's
Right,
probably
but
more
they
efficient
cannot
to go
go
to.
amongst
Yeah.
one another.
Right. No, I was
Playing
just
the
saying,
legal card.
either we each create them and we bring them to
Yeah.
the next meeting, or, and,
Yeah.
you know, or more, we do that and we bring them to the meeting, but we send them to John in advance.
Yeah. I think they go through Bob to John, and then that
Okay.
gets us where we need
Yeah,
to be.
I think that's probably the most efficient. I mean, while I am fully, I do support that we need commercial downtown. I also hear my fellow members comment that we've been talking about that for years in Millis, and it just hasn't happened. And to just carve out that one little parcel to not be part of this, in a way, doesn't necessarily make sense to me. I'd like to kind of do both and have it be part of this and also allow for commercial development. And if there's a way that we can do that,
That's what Nicole's overlay district does. It's
Right.
not part of this process, it doesn't count towards our goal. But by putting an overlay on it, it does what happened over at Nappertandy's and that whole section, you know.
And I think that's what people
Yeah.
were looking for when they
Yeah.
came to our in-person meeting. That was a feedback that I think I got, and I think we all got that, that people wanted that idea, that they could walk to a restaurant or a
Right.
shop or whatever and live, you know, within a block or two away.
Yeah.
And it's possible if we get that overlay to, you know, I get that getting development into Millis is hard. We've been going through that for years. While we may not end up with what Medway has, I think most people, I'm not going to say most people, that's a lot of people that I have discussed this with, don't want to see a big apartment complex right on 109, right in the center of town.
right.
And that's, if it's by right, and they know, and a developer knows, I can come in and do this, and I can, but I'm not gonna have to go through all of the steps
Right.
because it's by right, so I only have to get, you know, minimal review, and I don't have to deal with the public forum, the public hearings with planning board that are gonna go for 2, 3, 4 months, depending upon what the public outcry of it.
But how do they do that, Nicole?
How does who,
How
how do they
does,
do it?
how does Toll come in here or someone come in here and do that? What gives
There's-
them, what gives them the right under this to come in and do that size or that type of development?
So
there?
this development, right now, from multifamily, any subdivision whatsoever has to be done by special permit. So they have to come to the planning board and request a special permit, and that's, we have public hearings.
Right, I understand.
This, because it's of right, they don't have to request a special permit. So they get to bypass that whole process. They would still come to the planning board to review setbacks, review, you know, whatever the design elements that we put in this. We have our engineer look at and make sure that they're following the rules. But you're taking away the planning board's control to, well, the opportunity of the public to come in and say, here's what we're voicing, here's our concerns, here's why, because there is a provision, it's very hard to use, but there's a provision in the special permit laws that a planning board can say, you know, look, this is a dangerous, you're setting up, you know, this is a dangerous travel situation. I mean, there are a lot more controls. When it's by right, you know, if you buy a half-acre parcel of land and you decide you want to put a single-family home on it, you don't go through, you have the right to do that. That's
understand.
by right. The only thing you have to do is go to the building inspector.
But I recall John saying that could be prevented here. that we could require that architecturally and number of stories and all of that stuff, that we could build that in to this location. Is that not true, John?
That's absolutely true. So the way that we have it broken down is just by these three districts. If we refined those a little bit further, or said, you know what, maybe just this part of this district becomes different, we could have different regulations that would work for them. So as it is right now, we have it set up, everything divided into the three big areas, the three big districts, and then regulations that work for each one of those. So if we wanted to say some things are allowed by right, and it's just enough allowed by right that it gets through everything and it works for the compliance for the 3A, great. If we wanted to bake something in, or if they wanted to do something different or do something more, they would have to get a special permit to do that. We can absolutely do that kind of stuff too. And in scenario 3, we do talk about having a potential density bonus for these two properties right here in the middle, where if they wanted to go beyond the 20 units an acre, they would have to go and get a special permit in order to do something like that. So we can work some of this stuff in as much as we want to, as long as we get to a point where it allows the by right multifamily at a gross density for the whole town of 15 units an acre. Anything else we can have them ask for permission for, and whatever we need to do regulation-wise for these dimensional requirements or anything else, we can certainly bake all that into it as well.
Yeah,
so it's very much not a question of, is it just a free-for-all, or do they need a public hearing? We can certainly structure it, and as it was just mentioned, there's going to be all the internal review, even if anything is by right, working with the engineer, working with Bob, working with whoever at the town to make sure that, you know, if it's going to be permitted, it has to follow the law, and this is what the law would theoretically look like.
But once you move it to special permit, then it falls out of that MBTA regulations, because that law...
Only the multifamily stuff that gets us to 15 units an acre. All that has to be by right. Anything on top of that we want to do as part of this, you can require a special permit for.
And that's where I started out my...
If we wanted to say, for instance, we cap everything to 3 stories, but if you wanted to build 4 or 5 stories, you could get a special permit, and if the neighbors are okay with that, then they can move forward, great. We wouldn't include 4 or 5 stories in the modeling, because we have to figure out the actual gross density for what we're working with. We could do all that. So we have a lot of tools and a lot of flexibility here.
And I think that's how I started out, but hearing that we can't require commercial on the first floor, whereas under Nicole's scenario of turning that into the overlay district, we can. You know, we can require the commercial mix. If we can make it work without Ann and Hope, I think it's important not to put it in there. So but put it in a special permit. It can be developed as housing. We're talking about adding 700, 750 homes potentially, not all at once, obviously, to the town, and that is going to create more of a demand for commercial. And if we lose that one section of town because somebody's decided that that's going to be our first 200 unit. And let's say we structure it well and it's 150 units, but they've used my lot. You know, they've used it and it's gone and I can't put commercial in there any longer. That's a concern. You know, so I think Nicole's idea of special permit, as we've done elsewhere, gives us that flexibility and it protects it for commercial in the future if we need to.
But look what's happened so far, Craig. You got the property on the corner of 109 and Plain Street. Look at the new gas station there on the right that used to be the Sportsman. I mean, that's happening to I understand Nicole, what you're trying to accomplish with the overlay district. I really do. So I'm not trying to be controversial over this. But to require, as someone who's sold real estate and been involved in this for 45 years, depending on anything on the commercial side, it is going to be a tough.
I'm not depending on, but I'm saying if I'm throwing 750 more homes in the town over the next 20 years, there's probably going to be a demand for commercial, and that's the place that I'd like to see it go. And if it goes in as an overlay, so much the better. You know,
Or the places here do better.
Yeah.
Or the commercial people that would struggle here or don't want to come here because they can't make a go of it, actually may make a go of it.
Yeah.
So keeping the commercial base that you have healthy is also an obligation, you know, so,
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, I like the way you just changed that. That was my nice job on the fly. That's what I was going to pick up there, those two sections into the light blue.
So let me go ahead and propose this. It sounds like there's a lot of things to consider, and it sounds like there's a lot of things that we kind of want to let marinate. Something I'm going to push back on just a little bit is waiting another month to get this finalized, because we do have some concerns with a grace period as far as making sure that the state has time to review the bylaws and get everything set. So if we want to be in a position where we're going to be able to bring this forward to town meeting in May, our goal was to have the online open house online within the next couple weeks or so. So would you guys feel comfortable after we finish all the things that we want to talk through tonight? I'll go ahead and send this out to the committee. We'll figure out a time in about 2 weeks or so to get together and talk through everything and feel a little bit more final about what we want to take to the public. And then we'll do so, and it won't really impact our timeline as much. And I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here right to the very end. And this is how our timeline is looking in order to be able to get to town meeting in May. And I'm going to go ahead and work backwards here and say town meeting in May. Warrant has to come out in March. We have to send it to the state to have them 3 months to review. So that would be January. That means there needs to be a planning board meeting set up either in December or January. And then we have to have everything set on our end in November and actually work through all of the draft bylaws and things like that. And to get to that point, we need to talk about what was heard at the online engagement and launch the online engagement to get there. So if we push things back, it's going to really kind of crunch things right in here. And we want to make sure that we're having enough time to do that and not putting ourselves in a situation where we need to push things back any further. And since it sounds like this committee isn't in a good position to do that right now, would there be support to try and pull something together in the next couple of weeks once we've all had time to kind of think about this and then come back together? And then once we're all set, we'll be able to launch the online component, go to the public and ask for their thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think we can, once we get those handouts, I think we can do a turnaround in a couple days, with notes
Okay.
sent back to Bob and sent back to you. And then a very early September, as soon as kids are back in school, doesn't matter to me, but as soon as the people are done with vacations, we do it, and then we,
Well, he's saying mid-August for our next meeting,
oh, I'm sorry, I missed a month, okay, yeah.
because we're August 1st now.
We could hit mid-August if we had to. Yeah, I'm fine with another meeting mid-August to wrap it up and get it going and stay in your time frame.
Yeah, so we're thinking a meeting mid-August to finalize everything, and then we'll get together again at the end of September to kind of see what the public thinks. In between then, because we need to have enough time to look at everything that was done, analyze it, and put something together for you all so we can have a real conversation about it. So we were hoping to keep this online open house open for a month, and then we'll take about a week to synthesize everything and get it good to go, and then at the end of September come together again and have a conversation about how to move forward. And then we'll start to actually draft the zoning bylaw and really kind of finalize everything well. And in tandem, we have the show your support materials, which is something we're going to be preparing for this board so that you can feel as confident as you can going to the public and talking through everything so it hopefully passes at town meeting. That's what we want to do. So with that in mind, knowing that we're already kind of 8:30, are we okay just kind of putting a stop to the conversations we're having right now? We'll go through real quick what the online open house looks like and what that means so you all kind of understand where we're going. And then we'll call it for tonight, and I'll send out the information tonight so you guys can take a look at it. And then in the morning, I'll send out a doodle poll to see when we're able to get together in a couple weeks.
Yeah, Tuesdays are going to be tough in August, but Wednesdays are free. To include other days other than Tuesday, and let's see what we can do. Yeah,
Yeah, I can't
Okay.
do,
Wednesdays are good.
yeah.
my Wednesdays are terrible.
Oh, they just got picked
Oh.
up again.
Yeah, and Tuesdays are terrible.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've already got two,
Terrible Tuesdays.
3, Yeah, the next 2 Tuesdays are meetings.
Yes. So
Yeah.
let's send out the poll and see. I can do Thursdays if we need to, too. I was just trying to keep it
Yeah,
as
we'll
close
send
to.
out the poll. Maybe we end up on the 17th just because that seems like when things are kind of going. What we can do in the meantime is put together some like skeleton questions for things and then kind of
Yeah.
drop in all the actual content when we're ready to go. So this isn't something the body needs to take a vote on, but I'm sounding that it's sounding like that's an okay path moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's
Okay.
doable.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because I'd like to get
So-
I think we should get the comments of the members that are not,
Yes.
were not
Yeah.
able
Give
to
them
be
Yeah.
time.
here.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Do you open it to the public as well? We have one person who's not a member. I don't know if you want to speak. Somebody's.
I'd like to move us along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving this along, public engagement, online open house. So what we're
Great.
thinking about this is an engagement format where people participate via an online survey and add some maps into it, and also give the option to have some additional background information. So similar to the survey component of the previous engagement that we had earlier in the year, except this is something that we'll keep online for 3 weeks to a month, allow people to log in at their leisure. Nobody needs to be at any given place at any time, so we're not worried about schedules or weather or soccer practice or school starting up or anything like that. And then options to learn a little bit more about certain aspects of the project or zoning in general if the participants need to be brought up to speed. So we really take this approach where we don't take it for granted that people know exactly what some of this language is, and we try really hard to tone down the jargon as much as we can, but there's not another word we can use for some of this stuff. It has to be these legal terms. So we'll have options that say, if you need to learn more about this, click here, and they get a little bit more. And if somebody is like, you know what, I understand this pretty well, I can breeze through that, they have the option to do so. So we really try to empower people with it. We're going to present the different districts, the different scenarios, and ask some questions about how do they feel about it. Is this something that they would be comfortable with? Is this something that would have their support at town meeting? If we want to have specific questions, like I said, about certain parcels or about certain streets, and say, would we only be comfortable? Would you support? Would you not be okay with having something on Curb Street requiring all of those parcels to be townhomes? We could have a conversation or a question like that. So however specific we want to get with it, we can get with it. If we want to have anything that is just more macro, some big picture questions about how do you feel about this effort altogether, how do you feel about what it is that we're doing here, we can have those kinds of questions as well. So the meat and potatoes of it is going to be to understand how the public feels about these proposed zoning districts and if they're comfortable with how they look. And this is going to give us both the qualitative and quantitative data that we're going to need to see if any changes are going to be made. And I feel like in a perfect world, we would get something where the public really has a strong show of support for one of these, and hopefully it all jives with what the committee is thinking and moving forward. That being said, you never know what the public's going to say. You never know what the comments are going to be like. So we could get a really definitive answer out of this. We could get other things to consider. We could kind of just end up being back where we are here today and saying, well, the public's really divided. They would have equal support for all three approaches. So then it's going to be up to this deciding body to make a decision on that. What our role at MAPC is we're going to be handling all of the tech stuff to put this together. So have all the visuals done up, put all the questions together, add in the appropriate background information that we need to have happen, and then analyze the data, and when it's all said and done, put together the final boundaries, have the conversation with you all, and take it forward to actually turn it into a real bylaw once all of this is said and done and put together. So our role is the technical assistance, it's the background stuff, it's doing all of the other zoning things that are going to make this work, and it's going to be the role of the town and the committee essentially to make sure that people are going out there and doing it. So the town's role is going to be to advertise the online open house through all the official town channels, social media, newsletters, television, encouraging all the elected officials to share this with their constituents, and of course any appointed officials as well. And really what we want them to do is be in the same kind of position that the committee is going to be in. So of course we want you to participate and to fill out the questionnaire as well. We want you all to be encouraging your friends and neighbors to participate with direct asks and say, hey, can you please go ahead and do this because it's really important for the town, and post on your own social media channels. So post it to your Facebook feed, tag your friends, post in the various Millis Facebook groups, go on Nextdoor, wherever it is that people are congregating and figuring out what to do. And this could be flyers at the library, flyers in the town hall, going to businesses and asking to leave little stacks of paper out, whatever it might be. But what we're really asking for you all here is to try and drive the turnout for all of this. This is not something that we are well equipped to do. You all understand the committee, you understand the town better, you understand exactly where people are going to be receptive, and quite frankly, these asks mean a whole lot more coming from you all as people who live there, as people who have a lot of solid personal and time investments in this, than it's going to be coming from us. So this is what we're asking everyone to do once everything is all set up. And hopefully this is going to give us some really good direction on moving forward. And then after this is the next steps with the chart that I showed you all earlier. So does anybody have any questions on this online open house, what it is, what it means, or what the roles of the three different groups here are in putting all of this together?
I don't hear any on this end.
I think we're good.
I think we're good, that's right.
Cool. Good. So, like I said, we'll get started on kind of putting together a skeleton for some of this stuff, put together some thoughts, and obviously we don't want to be too question heavy. We know from our previous work that, the longer these surveys are, the less likely it is for people to fill them out. So we want to be really poignant in the questions that we have. But if we're coming back and saying, you know what, we really want to ask the public's thoughts on this site and if this approach would be supported versus something else, or if they don't care, we'll certainly be able to have that conversation. And I think in 2 weeks, after everybody's taken some time to kind of sit through all of this and think through it, send any feedback to Bob or myself, and we'll really be able to make this work. So I think that that's a good way to move forward with this. It sounds like everybody's on board with this. And I think that's a good place to kind of conclude our discussion for tonight, unless anybody else has something that they want to address while we're here. So I'll just go ahead and turn it back over to the chair.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
All right. Well, then, why don't we move on to approving our minutes from the prior two meetings?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from 1/25/23 and 4/20/23.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of our meetings from January 25th, 2023 and April 20th, 2023. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Any further discussion before we adjourn? All right, I'll take a motion.
Move adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.